Some of the greatest performers in the world have engaged a coach, even though they appear to be at the top of their game. He was probably the greatest golfer of all time, but Tiger Woods still got a coach to help him with his swing. Being the world #1 tennis player didn't stop Roger Federer getting a coach as well. In this episode, we explore what coaching is and why you should probably get a coach. I'm Jeremy Klein, and this is Change Work Life. Hello and welcome to Change Work Life, the show that's all about beating the Sunday evening blues and enjoying Mondays again. Now, I've spoken to quite a few coaches on the podcast about various different subjects, and I've also talked to some people who have been coached, and as well as that, I've actually had some coaching myself. So I thought it was really about time that I did an episode which was all about coaching, and in particular, how it can help you if, for example, you're not particularly happy in your job or your career. So to help find out a bit more about coaching, I'm joined by David Frank Gomes, who's a personal development coach and mindfulness teacher. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's wonderful to be here.
First of all, can you tell us a little bit about the type of coaching you do? So who are your clients and what sort of things do you help them with?
Yeah, I combine mindfulness with coaching. So a lot of folks are coming to me because, we live in the information age and there's a lot of overwhelm. There's a lot of information. Frankly, we're drowning in it. In a sense, a lot of people come to coaching and to me in particular because they want to become more present in their life as well as accomplish things. And it's very difficult to do in this modern world by yourself. So a lot of the folks I'm working with, it's not that they're not already quite successful externally. They are. I work with a lot of professionals, high-level entrepreneurs, business owners, C-suite executives. But so they're trying to find more meaning and purpose in their lives, and they want someone to walk the path with them. And human conversation has always been the crucible for social invention, for change, for transformation. So my coaching focuses pretty fiercely on fulfillment, finding more fulfillment in your daily life, empowerment, like learning to become more empowered, and mindfulness, which is learning to live skillfully and also start to work with your mind rather than have it work against you and become more present to the moments of your life. And I guess I'm a little biased, but I feel like everyone should have a coach in their life, at least for periods, and most people there's a misconception about coaching that it's boot camp or somebody telling you what to do, but it's really about creating a space where you can access your own inner wisdom, your own fulfillment, your own mindfulness. And let's face it, life is pretty complex and pretty weird out there these days. It's nice to have someone to be able to sort of walk the path with who isn't a friend, who isn't a lover, who isn't a boss, who isn't someone in your direct universe. And so that's something I think a lot of people appreciate about coaching too.
Is that how you would describe pretty much any kind of coaching, be it the sort of coaching that you do or business coaching or career coaching or anything, this space creation so you can access your own mindfulness, as I think you put it?
I would, and there's so much marketing and so much hype. There's so much there's this notion out there about niching and specialties, and people are obsessed with finding someone they think should know what they know. And I have the exact opposite. You don't need to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company to coach one. If you look at Olympic athletes and their coaches, or you look at, there's a very famous guitar coach, I can't remember her name, and a singing coach, and she's not a rock star, but she coaches them. So that's a myth. But I actually think all coaching is quite universal, right? Let's face it. Everyone comes to coaching for two reasons. They either want more of something in their life, or they have too much of something and they want less of it. There's their present state where they are now, and then there's this target state, this place they would like to be, and there's a gap in between. And so what I try and do is say, hey, yeah, there's this place in the future you want to be. Maybe it's you want to change work, or you want to, whatever the external situation is. So that's something to work towards. But I also focus heavily on the journey, on the process of enjoying getting to where you want to go. And if you really break down coaching, that's what it's all about. And so I'm dealing with a lot of people who are in business, as I said, C-suite executives. We're not talking about business. Very rarely do we talk about business. We talk about relationships. We talk about their personal lives. We talk about their health. We talk about what life means to them and new ideas. And so these are universal qualities. All human beings are looking to feel happier, more contented. They're looking to make their lives feel valuable. And coaching is just a way of accessing some of that stuff that isn't available oftentimes in daily life because we're overwhelmed. There's too much information and most people can't curate very well. Whereas as a coach, I'm curating. I'm a curator, right? I'm looking for a few things. I'm looking for really good, high impact ideas that actually work and clearing everything else away. And I'm looking to support people so that they can actually close that gap, but close it in a way, get from where they are to where they want to go, but enjoy the journey. Because if you can't enjoy the moment you're in, you will not enjoy the future. Because when you get there, it will come as the present moment. And in one sense, that's what all coaching is about. It's about waking people up to themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah. In terms of styles of coaching, I mean, you've mentioned that there's lots of people coach in different areas, but fundamentally they're all ultimately trying to get to the same place. Do coaches have different styles in the way they help people find their path? Are there sort of particular distinct styles that you can identify amongst coaches?
I don't pay too much attention to that, so that's a hard question to answer. I mean, there's certainly I think coaching is like anything else. There's a lot of different styles, and some people are very focused on externals. And for example, I really coach very few people under the age of 35. If someone comes to me and says, hey, I want to get a new Aston Martin DB7, that's my goal, then I would say there's probably a better coach for you then, because that doesn't actually interest me anyways. I don't mind if people want to work towards goals, but there's probably a better coach that's more focused on people who want to strive and become very high performers. So you tend to attract the coach you're interested in, right? So people are coming to me because they come to my website. It's got an energy to it, like you have an experience when you arrive on my website, and that appeals to a certain group of people. They're generally pretty successful already, but they want to give their money more meaning, you could say. There's so many different folks out there hanging their hats. And I always tell people, you've got to, first of all, if you're looking to work with a coach, you've got to make sure that you feel the most important thing is, can I trust this person? Do I trust them? Do I have a connection with them? And do they have the juice? Do they have the skills? Does it seem like they have the skills to really be able to support me? What's their website like? What did it feel like when I went on there? Were they trying to sell me something right away, or were they giving me interesting ideas? Do they use technology in their coaching? Like, do they have other ways of supporting you besides a phone call? Do they feel intuitive? Do they ask great questions? It's just an impossible question to really answer, but I think the most important thing when you're looking to work with a coach is that you feel that sense of connection and trust. And it's less about what their life path has been. It's always good to have a bit of contrast in your life, right? So in a sense, that's what I find about some of the folks I work with. They kind of appreciate the fact that I have quite a contrast in my life. I've come from a very different avenue than many of them have come from. And so it creates this really interesting synergy.
There's lots of interesting threads in there which I want to grasp, and I might not do them in kind of the order that they arose. But can we just grasp that last one first about your background? And perhaps you mentioned when we spoke previously that you've had 2 previous careers, so you've changed careers at least twice before you came to coaching. Well, what were you doing in your previous careers?
When I wore a younger man's clothing, I'm from Vancouver on the west coast of Canada, and so I worked in the lumber industry after I got out of school, and there was a downturn and I got laid off. And my brother was a hairdresser at the time, and he said, well, why don't you come and just wash some hair for a couple of weeks, and make a little extra money while you decide what to do. And so I thought, that sounds interesting. But 4 years later, I ended up doing the training. I actually went to London and I trained at Vidal Sassoon's in London, England. And so I worked at a pretty high level as a hairdresser for many years. And then I got into the film business. I got a little tired of that. And hairdressing is very interesting because it's a lot like coaching. You meet a lot of people, a lot of very interesting people from every walk of life. And it's a very intimate craft. We're working on people's hair, their bodies. And so you develop very intimate kind of connections. And that's probably one of the greatest gifts I learned about coaching was from hairdressing, was just to sit and listen to people. How much people crave that, just to be listened to deeply. And then I thought, I think I'll get into the motion picture business because the film business is pretty full on here in BC. So I did that, self-trained. You made a feature film in 2006, I think it was, did commercials, made short films, and created a couple of production companies, did that sort of full blast. And then at middle age, I realized that I had a kind of a calling that I'd always sort of thought about, and that was something to do with mentoring, or I didn't really know much about coaching, but something to do with helping other people. People had been seeking me out since my early 20s. I came to a spiritual path very young in life. And so I've had people my whole life coming, sort of seeking me out and wanting to talk. And I eventually discovered coaching. And I thought, I think that's something that I would be really good at, that I would really enjoy. I did the coach training. At 47 years old, I radically changed my life again. And so that was pretty challenging. The first few years were pretty lean, and it was almost a decade ago. So not many people were really into personal coaching. And a lot of people thought I was pretty crazy. And then I added mindfulness to it, which they thought was even crazier. But I really felt a calling in my heart that this was important work and that I had something valuable to offer people. And that's how I transitioned later in life. And so I know a lot about transitions, having done them myself. And I do a lot of work around transitions because if you really think about it, we're always in transition. Some of them are very minor. You're hungry and you eat. That's a transition. You walk out the door of your home into the world. There's a transition. Something is in your life and then it's gone. That's a transition. You have a job. You lose your job. You need to find another job. If you really think about it, how we manage our transitions is really how we manage our lives. And that's something I focus on a lot in my work, because as people learn to manage the transitions of life, the small ones and the big ones, they find a much deeper sense of contentment, of fulfillment, of empowerment, and they start to understand it's pretty mysterious. Your life is pretty mysterious if you stop and think about it. And there's no situation in which paying careful attention would not be a helpful antidote and a healing response to almost anything in your life. So mindfulness, learning to pay attention, coaching, figuring out what you want to do and experience in the world, and doing it.
So you've talked about a coach's job being to listen to people. From the perspective of a potential client, what for them is the job of a coach? How do they know that a coach that they've engaged is helping them, and what does success look like for a client?
Again, that's impossible for me to answer. There's just such a wide range of potential reasons people seek out a coach. So broadly, I can say there's two streams. One is people are looking for more meaning. So now I work with an older demographic, so 35 up. I think my oldest client was 90. She'd written 3 books. So as you get up the ladder, by the time you're 50, some illusions have been burst. So you realize that the next shiny object is probably not going to give you the happiness. Whereas when you're 25, you're focused on your career, you're focused much more externally for the most part. So that's the stream of people coming and going, I know there's more to my life than all this stuff, and I want to explore it. And for a lot of people, they want to explore their spirituality, but they don't want to be part of any traditional religious kind of vibe. That's something they can do with me. And then there's a sort of the second stream, and those are people that are really dissatisfied or unhappy. In the wisdom traditions, we call it something like dissatisfaction. not quite satisfied. This is actually the human condition. Like people they're never quite satisfied. That's the second stream. So there's something really going on in their life and they cannot figure it out. And so they're either referred to me or they start doing research, or somebody says, why don't you work with a coach? Maybe they can help you. But in the ultimate sense, success is feeling better. It's feeling contented. It's feeling happier. It's feeling more empowered. This is the benchmark of successful coaching outcomes, and also achieving whatever your cherished goals are. It's a being world and a doing world. The being piece is the inner piece. The Japanese call it ikigai. It means reason for being. It means your life feels valuable to you. It's the inner life. It's your values. It's what you care about. It's what you're willing to take a stand for. It's what energizes you and gives you life. And then the doing piece is the action piece. That's how you decide to put your values to work out in the world. And so these two pieces have to support each other. So people are either coming because they want to work on the being piece, they've got the doing piece done, or they come because they're all being and they need to take some action. That's what I've noticed.
What sort of emotions or thoughts might someone be experiencing that could lead to someone saying, maybe you should think about getting some coaching?
I suppose the metaphor, it's similar to going to a doctor. Why do you go to a doctor? You feel something's not quite right. They're pretty universal. What stops most people? Fear of failure, perfectionism, can never get it quite. It's never good enough. I'm not good enough. That's kind of another universal theme. I'm peering deeply into people's lives with them. So I see the truth. Like when you work with a coach, the coach sees the truth. Like the truth comes out. There's no big mystery here. If people don't feel like they're enough and they don't feel like they know enough, it's a central lie. I don't have enough information. I need to do more research. I need more information. And so this is the great myth of the information age, that you don't have enough data and you're not enough to actually live a life you want. In the wisdom traditions, it's exactly the opposite. Like we don't need to add anything to ourselves, actually, to become our best selves. We need to unbecome what we're not. And these are the universal emotions that all human beings have. And when you connect to something deeper inside yourself, the volume starts to get turned down on fear and not feeling good enough. There hasn't been a new problem since the time of the Buddha or beyond, 2,500 years ago. If you can tell me a new problem that modern people have, underneath it all, it looks different on the outside. Yes, we have technology, we have the internet, we have more information than we've ever had, but essentially all human problems are the same. You arrive in this mystery, you kind of live in this mystery, and then you go to some other mystery. And, most people don't spend any time thinking about that. They're not asking themselves the big enough questions. And of course, this creates a lot of fear and tension in their lives, because in one sense, this isn't our home. We're temporary visitors. And you could say that we're just renting here. Everything, in the wisdom traditions, we say something like everything is a rental, right? Your body's a rental. You don't own anything. You come here, you mess around for a while, try and find some purpose if you're lucky, and then you go somewhere else. So they're universal ideas. That's the kind of coaching that I'm engaged in. That's the ecosystem that I'm working with, is to help people ask the bigger questions, which turns down the volume on things like fear and worry and anxiety and all the usual suspects that we all feel and that are magnified in this digital age. And then let's throw in a global pandemic just to sweeten the pot a bit.
Absolutely, yes. I'm sure that's bringing things into sharper focus for a lot of people. You mentioned towards the start of this interview that you said you might be biased, but everyone would benefit from some coaching. Is there a particular mindset or state of mind that it is helpful for people to be in order to get the most out of coaching? Or is reaching that mindset something which that's what the coach will start with?
Yes and no. Is it helpful to be, if you're going to climb the Himalayas, then it's probably helpful to train and be ready and have the right supplies and hire a Sherpa and all those things. So yeah, are you going to benefit more if you're really keen? And I can usually tell in about 5 minutes whether someone is really serious about the coaching. Yeah, it helps if you take it seriously and you're willing to put the work in, put the truth down. But it's also helpful for people who don't do any of that, it's helpful for everybody in one sense, because whatever, the Stoics have a saying, the obstacle is the path. So whatever the impediment is the path. So for a lot of folks who don't put a lot of effort into it, at the end of coaching, like they have this stark kind of reminder of why they are where they are in their lives. And other folks put a lot of work into it. I mean, they really take it seriously and they enjoy it and they get somewhere that blows their mind. And then there's some people in the middle that are just dipping their toes in. And so it's valuable for everyone, because at the end of it, you get this kind of snapshot of who you really are. Because at least in my process, you can't really hide from yourself in my process. But some people do make much more, they have much more explosive growth, generally because they're putting the work in and they're taking it seriously. But that's a universal truth, right? If you're gonna put the time in, you're gonna get the results.
You mentioned that coaches are curators. So, and one of the questions I had is what a coach can offer that isn't already out there. As you pointed out, there's just so much out there that how do you choose the sort of, I'm not going to say what's right, but maybe the thing that's been demonstrated to be most effective or best practice or whatever it might be. So I can certainly understand how the curating element of a coach can be extremely valuable. Are there any other aspects that working with a coach personally, that there's aspects of that you just don't get from DIY self-help books, online tests, that sort of thing?
There's been a lot of self-help books written, hasn't there? And there's a lot. You could spend the rest of your life on the internet studying mindfulness. My work is 99% about practice and 1% about theory. So you've got to find someone that you feel has something to offer. And again, it's a difficult question to really, I'm not sure exactly how to answer it. I just think that people are overwhelmed. And so, yes, you can go and buy a self-help book on a myriad of products. You can take online courses. But I see this again and again, like people get a gym membership and they don't use it. They buy a book and they don't read it. They take a course and they don't do it. So I offer this super supportive ecosystem, and I have this complete online process as well. So I have a complete system. So I'm sort of walking every step of the way with people so that doesn't happen. Are there some self-motivated people that don't need coaches? Of course. I mean, not everyone does. I have just found it really valuable to have a coach, because it's just like, it's someone to support you, to encourage you, to push you a little when you need it, and to create this ecosystem so you have the greatest opportunity to succeed. And for most of us, the knowledge is out there, but we don't practice it. So I'm more interested in people practicing simple things that work than I am in creating complex systems that people don't use. And that's what I notice. People don't want to practice on their own. It's too hard. So it's easier to practice with someone who will walk the path with you. And that person that is walking the path with you should have some experience in this stuff. I have a 30-year practice. I can help and guide people in that sense because I've been doing this kind of work for most of my life.
And there must be an accountability element there as well. You know, if you've made an appointment with someone, then you are going to stick to it. And I've no idea whether there are statistics to support it, but I would guess that people who have regular personal training sessions probably see results quicker than those who have just the basic gym membership that they never use.
For sure. I call it the power of the witness. So when you've got somebody witnessing, and Jeremy, you've said to me, I want to do X, you've got a witness there. And so the witness is like, okay, if you're not doing X, what's going on? Do you not want X? Or so that's really powerful. But again, coaching isn't boot camp. So the purpose of life is not to have somebody kicking your butt all the time. Like that's low level motivation. You actually don't need to motivate yourself to do something you deeply care about. A lot of self-help stuff, it's all backwards. So people spend their lives trying to devise systems to do things they don't like. And And I don't work that way. So my coaching system is completely different anyway. So accountability is something we build together. It's not something I tell you to do. It's something we build together. And when you start to really care about things and start to pay attention to things, motivation isn't a problem. It's only a problem in our complex, overwhelming, silly world because they're following other people's playbooks. They think that because somebody's a famous blogger that they should have the same morning ritual that person has. I'm much more interested in having people create their own rituals, create their own success rituals, create their own lives of meaning and purpose. Like, what original idea can you come up with from your own life, from your own learning? So it's not about copying somebody else's thing, which I think you see a lot of. I mean, there's a lot of nonsensical, what I would call rubbish coaching out there. It's not real coaching. But again, you get the teacher that you want, right? So you tend to be attracted to things. So there's just a certain type of person that's attracted to what I'm offering. And but certainly accountability, I have noticed anecdotally anyways, it certainly improves when you have a coach.
Finding a good coach and finding a coach that's right for you. You've mentioned that you can get an idea whether someone is going to be a good fit for you by looking at their website and their content and that sort of thing. But if you're new to the idea of getting a coach and there are just so many coaches out there, where do you start? I'd like to be coached, but I have no idea where to start. Do I just sort of type coach in my local town into Google, or what's a good starting point?
First of all, I might reach out to my network and see if anyone's had any experience. Anyone ever worked with a coach? It's amazing how many people will tell you coaching is rubbish who've never worked with a coach, which is interesting. So that would be the first thing I would do. And then you'd have to get on the internet and do some research. I mean, the good thing about coaching is you can do it on the phone or on Zoom so I work with people around the world. A lot of people I never meet in person. In fact, I do very little in-person coaching anymore, even before the pandemic. It's not about having to meet someone in person, and it's not about having to have someone in your own town. It's actually about having someone who you feel can help you get where you want to go. And it's like anything else. I mean, you've got to put some time in and look around and see if you can get some referrals. So that's how a lot of people arrive on my doorstep. Someone's told them about me, or else they look at my website and they go, oh, this is interesting. Like, I'm really interested in mindfulness. So if you're not interested in mindfulness, I wouldn't be a good coach for you. So I'm not a marketer. I'm not trying to sell anything to anyone. I don't want to convince anyone. I've convinced myself that's enough. If you get on a website or you talk to somebody, ultimately you want to try and talk to a few people and see what it feels like. And the message doesn't resonate, then move on. And if it does resonate, almost all coaches offer a short complimentary session. I do, just so we can connect and find out, would this be a good fit? It's a complicated world. I don't know what to say. I mean, there's a lot of choice out there. So we all need to get better at curation. Like, we all need to get better at figuring out, what do I care about? What do I want to do with this one precious life that I have? And if you feel like you need some support, I want to call it help. Everybody needs support. Everybody needs mentors, coaches, wise people in their lives. Even if you're not hiring a coach, like, find someone you can talk to about something bigger than just the problems of today. And that does require learning to look deeply into things. That's kind of a long-winded answer to say I'm not sure.
I've got one more impossible question. Well, I don't know, it might not be impossible, but it's something that I see raised on discussion forums and that sort of thing. And the answer is probably it depends on a myriad things. But basically, how much does coaching cost?
How much does a car cost? That would be my answer, would be that question. Anywhere from nothing to $100,000 a year and up.
Do you think coaches are out there for every budget?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And my experience has been that about 85% of people can find a coach, hire one, and afford it. Might be a stretch. If you wanted to really look at most people's spending, there's about 10-15%. Like, I know I talk to people and they just, no matter what, they absolutely could not afford to work with me. But most people can if they decided to make a few changes. If someone invested in a coach every couple of years, it's like you take your car to a garage. You don't drive your car, forever and not take it to the garage occasionally, get an oil change, a tune-up, you hear a noise, you need to take it in. It's no different with our lives. And there's lots of coaches. And if you're in a position where you have a limited budget, you can go to coaching schools and work with students who are studying coaching. And if you have the money, then you're more likely to find a more experienced coach. But generally, I would say expect to pay, again, I'm just throwing this out there, but $3,000 to $5,000. I don't know what that is in pounds, but there is a huge range depending on, but there's definitely a coach for every budget. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I think people will find that quite heartening, actually, because I'm sure that's one of the objections is that it costs too much. So I think the knowledge that there's someone for everyone, including your wallet, will definitely help people. David, I know you have a recommended reading list. Is there sort of one or maybe two books on that list which you can particularly recommend that people take a look at if they're interested in the subject further?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many depending on what you're interested in, but I think Mastery is a great book by Robert Greene. If you want to learn about how people attain mastery in different sort of fields, that's often an interesting idea as people are trying to attain mastery in some field of theirs or they want to devote their lives to something. I think, if you're looking for improvements on habits, James Clear, his Atomic Habits, wonderful book if you're focused on that.
Yes, I read that about a year or so ago. It's an extremely good book, quite practical as well.
Yeah, it's excellent. If you're looking for a book, if you want to explore your spirituality, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse is a wonderful, beautiful short story that sort of has implications for today's world. It's a very inspirational story. Or the Tao Te Ching, which is a sort of a handbook for living. Stephen Mitchell does an interpretation, which is amazing. That's a book I have that I read regularly. So there's a few different sort of books that cover off a few different things.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put links to all of those in the show notes. And where's the best place that people can find you?
They can find me at my online home, which is davidfrankgomes.com. And there's lots there. I have lots of articles they can read if they want to learn more. It's pretty extensive. I have mindfulness guided meditations they can listen to and practice. And they can, of course, watch videos of my dogs.
The dogs doing what?
Oh, what dogs do, chasing bones and various other things.
I will have to check that out, and I will definitely put the link in the show notes. David, thank you so much for this. It's been a really helpful insight into what coaching is, what it can do for you, and why everyone should get a coach. So thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me, Jeremy. I appreciate it.
One thing that really leapt out from me from this interview is that it's true, it has never been easier to find information these days. You can find information about virtually anything, any topic that you choose. You can just put it into Google and you will be able to find something to help you with a particular problem or whatever it might be. The difficulty is that there's so much information out there, and even though I have read quite a few self-help books, and a lot of them have been very helpful, they've been good to read, they've come up with some really useful and interesting ideas and topics, I can still see how coaching will benefit me. There's the idea of curatorship that David was talking about, how a coach can sift through all of this information and help you with just finding the best practices, the things that have been proven to work. But also a coach can help you put what you've learnt into practice. Yes, a lot of these self-help books will have exercises attached to them, but as David put it, a coach can walk down that path with you, helping you with your own personal implementation of these particular exercises and practices. And David also dealt with a common objection I see about the cost of coaching. Yes, some coaches can be really expensive, but I love David's suggestion about going into coaching schools and getting students to coach you. I mean, why not? If you're in a position where you just can't afford to spend much on a coach, you'll probably get something out of being coached by a coaching student, in the same way that some people will go and get a haircut from someone who is training to be a barber or a hairdresser. Even if that person isn't fully qualified or experienced, chances are they're being supervised, and so it's a pretty low risk and potentially low cost way of getting into it. So I'm convinced that coaching will continue to be something that I should pursue, and hopefully it might have helped convince you too. Links to the resources which David mentioned and to his website are at changeworklifecom/63 for episode 63. And if you found this episode or any previous episodes helpful and you'd like to show your appreciation, well, one of the things you can do is share this episode with your network. You'll find on my website links to my Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram profiles. And on each of those profiles, you'll find a post which relates to this episode. So do go on there, retweet, share it on Instagram, share it on Facebook. You'll also find on the show notes page for this episode links to Pinterest, so you can share this episode there as well. Please just do share this episode. It will really help other people and it'll also help me get the word out. There's another great interview coming up next week and I can't wait to see you then. Cheers. Bye.